It's finally Friday. It's Friday, Friday.
Thank God it's
Welcome to the first 2020 edition of The Friday Show. I'm Scott Jagow along with Ray Paulick. Happy New Year. We're presented by the Pennsylvania Horse Breeders Association. Their 10th annual Stallion auction is coming up 16th through the 18th. We'll tell you about it in just a bit. But first, since the calendar has flipped, Ray, you and I got to talking about what are some of the trends and stories that really stand out over the last decade to us. So we came up with a list. It's not definitive by any means. It's just some thoughts. So let's get started on our list. The first one that stands out has to be the drought. The Triple Crown drought, 37 years, broken by American Pharoah.
Yeah, finally. I don't know how many times I went to Belmont Park with the anticipation that this was going to be the year that the Triple Crown drought was over. There was every time there was disappointment, one degree or another. Sometimes there were some close calls, some not so close calls. Finally, American Pharoah did it, and it wasn't even close. It was a romp. It was, he completely dominated the series. He broke the drought, and then the very next year, my beloved Chicago Cubs broke a 108-year drought by winning the World Series. So I think he smashed through some glass windows to open and get fresh air for all the other droughts out there.
Yeah, well, Justified then also won the Triple Crown, but he broke that long drought of not having raced as a 2-year-old, winning the Kentucky Derby. So there's another one. What I remember, even before the Derby, looking back in hindsight, there's always buzz about certain horses, but the buzz about American Pharoah was off the charts. The comparisons to Seattle Slew, and it was to a man and woman in the industry. I mean, everybody was talking about this horse, so it's not surprising in hindsight. And then the other thing I remember about it is being in the stands when 110,000 people are cheering that horse on, and of course, being a journalist, I recorded the moment for history. My video went viral, and it was a lot of fun, but I've never heard a crowd that loud, and that moment will remain in my heart forever.
Well, a story that I think is a good news and a bad news story of the last decade is Aftercare and welfare, thoroughbred horse welfare. In 2012, the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance was founded. I think that was a really important step for the industry to recognize institutionally how important it is that these horses are taken care of after the careers are over. And as the decade wound down in just the past year, we saw the downside of animal welfare. The media got a hold of the fact that horses suffer fatal injuries in competition, asked a lot of questions, put the industry under the microscope. There was some reaction to it, but in my opinion, not enough, at least not enough on a national basis. So this is a story that's not going away, but I think the recognition of aftercare as an important part of the industry is really key.
Since 2012, the TAA has raised $14 million for accredited groups that are aftercare organizations. They've helped 9,000 thoroughbreds. There are 70 organizations that are accredited, and the accredited part is really important. Michael Blowen of Old Friends recently told us how important that is, because we've reported on stories where you've got some seedy people trying to take advantage of horse rescue and pump up the money to save a horse from slaughter and all that kind of stuff, and then neglect. So the accreditation part is really important. Another thing that's been helpful in thoroughbred aftercare is the thoroughbred makeover, which came online a year later after the TAA, and that's helped retrain a number of just fresh off the track horses into the sport horse world, and that's only gaining popularity. So big trend in the last decade.
I think the same type of approach that was taken to form the TAA is going to be needed to address this serious issue of equine fatalities. It's not just a public relations problem. It's a real problem.
Agreed. All right, another trend that I feel is important and one that will continue to grow is turf racing in North America. If you look at the stats, the last stats I had were a couple of years ago, but I think the trend fits. early 90s, about 5% of races were on the grass. Jumped to 2017, that number had more than tripled to 17%. I'm sure it's higher now. Almost 40% of graded stakes races are on the turf now. So, and we've talked about the reasons behind this, the competitive nature of turf races. Owners want to see their horses compete and not get beat by 12 lengths. It sometimes happens on the dirt. You've got more stallions that are producing runners. There's more influence from Europe. You've got people like Chad Brown going over there and bringing horses back. So there are a lot of factors that go into it, but I think it's clear when you look at the cards and the field sizes, turf racing is on the rise.
Yeah, it really is. And there's still a few tracks out there that don't have turf racing. Oaklawn Park probably being, the number one track that is 100% dirt. And now that they've extended their meeting, and that's a big change for Oaklawn Park to go into early May versus shutting down in mid-April. I wonder if maybe a turf course is in the future there.
Well, give us another development over the last decade that you think is important.
Well, do you remember what life was like before smartphones? We'd sit around tables and talk to each other instead of sitting there looking at our phones and scrolling. Just think of how smartphones have changed not just the horse industry, but life in general. But in the horse industry, it's made it much more accessible. It's made news travel lightning fast. It's allowed us to wager from practically anywhere with our phones, to watch races live on our phones, to interact with other people. Social media, there's a good side and a bad side to it. But this has all happened in the last 10 years, and it doesn't seem like it. It seems like we've had these things attached to our hands for longer than that. But this is a development of the last 10 years, and it's really changed the industry.
Sure. From a betting standpoint, handicapping, you've got workout videos that are accessible on your phone, instantaneously, plus the ability to bet from your phone. There's that. But the news part of it also, I feel is really important. I mean, I remember a couple of years ago, we were sitting at a restaurant in Florida in December, and we were getting word about a fire in Southern California, the San Luis Rey fire. And then, things were blowing up. There was rumors and incorrect information and all that, the bad side, as you pointed out. But then there was the video that went viral on Facebook, and it galvanized the industry to help support the survivors and the horses and in the unfortunate tragedy there. It is a total change in our mindset and the way we approach things.
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember how I would learn about, Kentucky Derby trail developments from Joe Hirsch, who was the number one reporter in all of racing. He would send something in on the telex machine. It would get edited and put into print, and the next day it would be printed. Nowadays, that sort of stuff, if you don't find something out within 15 minutes of it occurring, you feel like you're in the dark. Back then, it was 24, 48 hours after something happened before you'd find out. So it has completely changed, not just accessibility, but the information, the spread of information.
They're off in the Kentucky Derby.
Okay, our final development from the last decade is the Kentucky Derby point system, which came into existence in 2012. Previously, it was graded stakes earnings that determined the participants in the first Saturday in May. Then it went to a point system, and I think it has had several effects. I mean, one is the race seems to be more formful. Previously, you would get horses that would qualify in a shorter race, and then they would be in already based on the purse money. Here, you have to qualify through races that are closer and closer in distance to the Derby. So I think you're getting more formful races, and favorites have been winning more often in the last few years.
Yeah, you could have a Grade 3 race worth $1 million at 6 furlongs, and the winner would have an automatic berth in the Derby, which makes no sense. I think the other thing that the point system has done, it's made it, number one, easier to follow for the general sports fan, and the Derby is the one race that appeals to the general sports fan. And two, it's made the points prep races that much more interesting. And I think it's probably changed the way owners and trainers start mapping out the campaigns for their top 2 and 3-year-olds. It does start during the 2-year-old season. And as you said, it's eliminated some of the sprinters, and that's because the 100-point races at the end of the prep season are all longer races. So I think it's made perfect sense, and it's had a desired effect to make it more popular on the road to and at the destination, the Derby itself.
And one other thing, it's opened up the possibility of international participation. We've had some, but with the Japanese road to the Derby and then the European road, we haven't gotten those horses quite yet who are probably going to win the Kentucky Derby, but at least there's some interest there. And of course, in Japan, it's generating wagering.
Yeah, that's the play in Japan, that they want to get into that huge betting market in Japan. Just think of how popular the NBA is with their expansion worldwide. China is a big part of the NBA's success, and that was a concerted effort to expand it. And they're trying to do the same thing with the Derby, and we've seen the Breeders' Cup try to do the same thing with their races, getting into the Asian market.
Well, Ray, the Pennsylvania Horse Breeders Association has its 10th annual Stallion auction coming up the 16th through the 18th, and this is all online. It'll take place at thoroughly-bred.com.
Yeah, you got to go there first, register for the auction. And if you want to see some of I think it's something like 75 stallions whose seasons are going to be available, go to PHBA.com. They're not just Pennsylvania stallions. They're from 5 different states, a lot of Kentucky stallions. We've got Maryland, New York, even Florida stallions, plus Pennsylvania, of course. It's a really strong sale.
And you can access information and links at PABred.com. It's free to register. You go there to take care of that, so you'll be ready to participate in the auction. Again, that's PABred.com. That is going to do it for this edition of the Friday Show. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time.